From the Tower of Babel to the United Nations, man has constantly striven to create a formula for uniting all nations. Today from Israel, Dr. Lester Sumrall will explore man's quest for one world.
Now, in this lesson, which is lesson number 2 in this series, who wants the nations of mankind to become one world? Who desires it? Who are those behind it? Who are those that are working toward it? Everybody? Only a few people? Are those that have reasons which are not known, secret reasons for it? Who is thinking about one world now, and what kind of world are they thinking of? If you would open your Bible with me to the book of Daniel, chapter 4, the first great world ruler, the first great architect of empire, his name was Nebuchadnezzar. It says, the king speaks unto all people, that's one world, all nations, all languages that dwell in all the earth. That's one world, but it was a military world. It was not a peaceful world. It was not a world of democracy where people voted for it. It was a world where they came under the iron fist of a dictatorship and had to obey. It says, peace be multiplied unto you. I thought it good to show the signs and the wonders that the Most High God hath wrought toward me. How great are his signs, how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. His dominion is from generation to generation. Without a doubt, man from his humble beginnings has desired peace on earth. He has desired fraternizing with those of other colors, other races, other nations, and he's found obstacles that are bigger than he is, you know, and he reaches to bring peace on earth and to bring men together, and just as he tries, it all blows up in his face. And that is the history of empires. That is the history of nations. There has always been a desire for one world. Man wants to consolidate all peoples, just as Nebuchadnezzar claimed at that point in history that he had. Possibly the most important question tormenting the minds of world leaders as of this moment in all the national capitals of the world on the face of this earth is, how can we formulate a formula for global peace and for security of all the peoples of the earth? Most world thinkers believe that world government is the total answer, is the only answer to global problems. They just don't believe that you can have a strong government here, a strong government there, and a strong government over there, and have peace. They feel that in order to have peace, there must just be one government and one economic system, one money, one kind of money, not dollars and marks, but just one common money upon the face of this earth. Then we have to say to ourselves, is one world desirable for common people, you know, like you and me, for the masses of humanity? History has never witnessed an era since the catastrophe of the Tower of Babel when the masses of humanity have so universally desired collaboration as they have since the atomic awakening. That's what brought the world to its senses. And the struggle over intercontinental missiles, that is a struggle unto this moment, and satellites hidden from the natural eye of man, but they're there to spy. They know secrets. They know things that are far beyond the average person's comprehension. Atomic fission, blasting from Alamogordo in New Mexico, that I walked on that site the other day, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Bikini, it birthed a new epoch in the history of mankind. These far off names seem to have come out of some dreadful witch's womb and hatched monstrous uncertainties for the future of the world. And man began to think in a way that he hadn't thought maybe ever before. It's time for man to live together in peace. It's time for man to live together without war. It's time for man to live together and not fight. A sure fact is this: isolationism has suffered a deadly wound. You cannot hide. America cannot have an imaginary wall around it and say, inside this wall, there's peace. No, that wall does not exist anymore. There has to be a world peace. There cannot be a local peace. It will be destroyed. In the popular mind of over 4,500,000,000 human beings who are earth dwellers upon planet Earth today, as never before, they're saying, give us one world. Give us a peaceful world. Give us a prosperous world. We're weary and tired of blood and, and sweat and tears of the whole thing. We would like comfort, and we'd like to live together. Who has said this? Dr. Albert Einstein, who helped to usher in the atomic age, said these words. He said, I propose that the Soviet Union, Great Britain, and the United States create a world government. And then after they have adopted a constitution, invite smaller nations to come and join them. Einstein gave much to modern science, but he lived to see the world torn in anger and hate. Yes, he desired one world, but he saw no manifestation of it. And he was one of those that helped to create the monstrous thing that awakened the world to know that it was time that we talk together and live together in peace. Dr. Nicholas Murray Butler, who is a former president of Columbia University, said, if I were a young man, I would not go into education. I wouldn't follow education as I have done in this lifetime. I would devote my life to the realization of world federation. Now, here's a man that pursued education in all of his natural life. And he said if he had another life to live, he wouldn't educate human beings. He'd go to put men together. He'd go to study how men could live together under one government. You see, brains of the world at this moment are trying to seek to find a way to bring all the nations of the world into one government. Behind me is the great city of Jerusalem. It's the city where empires die. Every empire in history has laid its finger upon that city. Every empire in history has come to this city to judge it. Babylon conquered it and destroyed it. And they were drinking from the holy vessels of the temple right yonder. The very moment that God wrote on the wall and says, your destiny has been numbered and is finished. And that night the Babylonian Empire ceased to exist. It died that night. Every other empire, Persian Empire, Greek Empire, Roman Empire, and out of that, all of the other great leaders of history have put their finger upon this place. Maybe the last Arab mayor of that city, before he ran for his life to get away, said the right thing. He said, Jerusalem is a golden bowl full of deadly vipers. Put your hand in it and you die. Every great nation, including your country, America. Britain died at this point right behind me. The great British Empire that ruled the whole world, the first piece of real estate it ever lost was that one right behind me here. And from that, they lost a whole empire. They didn't judge Jerusalem properly. Any leader that does not judge Jerusalem according to the precepts that God has laid down in our universe, he has to die. There's mystery in that city, and there's mysterious power related to that city. And you go against it, and you will absolve yourself from human activity. It's a written and it's a final thought. But there are those, like Dr. Robert Lee Humbert, who said, world federation cannot fail. well, they've been working at it for about 6,000 years. It's an idea whose time has come. You see, he wanted one world, and though he was a great thinker and a great man of philosophy, he saw the world needed it. You see, but how are you going to bring it about was his problem. Admiral Chester Nimitz formerly a fleet admiral of the American Navy, said, "Peace will only be an interlude between wars unless all of us learn the art of living in a global community." You see, he had a feeling that until we could create the whole of our world into one community, peace would only be an interlude. War and war and war, you see. And he was a man that gave his whole life to military strategy. He understood what he was talking about. We live in a world today where great men, like Brzezinski, for example, he wrote a book that was related to having the world to become one under federation. He strongly believes that the object to which nations must move to the ultimate establishment, he says, through the United Nations, a federal world government founded upon law and representative of true principles of international democracy must come. Brzezinski would like to bring it about. He was a former national security advisor for the Carter administration, and he would like to see it. Powerful internationalists, all of these are aligned together, whether they are military men, whether they're economic men, whether they're diplomatic tycoons, oralists, philosophers. They make bureaus, they make commissions, they make committees, they make subcommittees, and they're seeking a solution for merging 5 continents, harmonizing the 5 basic colors of mankind, destroying social stratum of society, blending royal blood, blue blood, common blood, red blood, from all of the common people of the world. For sure, the attitude of the masses of the planet Earth are for a one world program. And they say, tell us the facts about it. There is enthusiasm. The man in the street is friendly toward what we call one world. Why does he seek for one world? This tormenting fear that has driven the masses of mankind to desire a world federation of nations. You wouldn't be an American anymore. You would be a member of a world community. It could be no pride of nation. That would have to cease to exist. There'd be a pride of world. Intelligent persons fear the extinction of the human race, and they are reaching for this last hope. And they're hoping that they will be able to see that world in their lifetime. Intellectuals, they vaguely hope that organizing nations, taking their guns away from them where they won't be able to fight, will save the earth from some cataclysmic annihilation. They say if we don't do it soon, there will be no more world. This sensational interest in one world factor is of greater importance than the average person surmises. Like you're sitting there in your home at the present time, looking at me, and I have behind me that mysterious and marvelous city of Jerusalem that the world has placed hope in many times, and there will be a future hope in this city that will be unlike any other nation on the face of the earth. It has a deep spiritual and prophetical significance, and until we come to that aspect of it, it's possibly that politics, economics cannot create a one world situation. It will have to be something that's deeper into the spiritual life of the human race. Now, if you study the Bible, if you're a Bible student, if you know much about the Bible, you will see that it has predicted from the beginning of Gentile empires, when men of state, such as the man called Daniel, and such as the king that we read you about a few moments ago, called Nebuchadnezzar, they saw prophetically that the final world leader would be a master of all nations in the height and the might of his power. So with the masses of the people of the world at this moment, I think they're more ready for one world than they have ever been in history. As they are ready to unite, it reveals that the international stage is fast being set to embrace the final drama of Gentile vaudeville. We're at the finality of, as we have moved for several millennia, of Gentile world powers, governing some of them the whole world and some of them parts of the world. Ultimately, in the final days of this dispensation that you and I live in, the leaders of governments, because of a gigantic stalemate in their conferences and their secret conclaves, will welcome some unique person called a world diplomat, and he will have the authority of directing the total nations on the face of the earth. He could be called the Secretary of the United Nations. He could be called the President of the Common Market of Europe. We don't know. When he comes, it'll be a nice name. Mussolini, you remember, was called El Duce, and Hitler was called the Führer. And so they can find nice names for people after they come. But when he comes, it will be with an iron hand, and no one that stands against him can live. These are days ahead of us and before us, and days that we should have a very special interest about. Our world that we live in today is looking for a person with nerves of steel, with global ambitions, and that will stand up and say, listen, to the whole world, I know how to bring you peace, I know how to bring you prosperity, and I'm the only one that can do it. Follow me. And the Bible says that the nations of the world will just do that. Your question inside of you, and I don't blame you for it at all, is why does man strive for this one world situation? Number one, and I think I said it in lesson 1 of this series, man wants to build his own way to heaven without God. Man doesn't want God to have anything to do with his peace. He wants world peace with God outside of it, you know. He wants to control the world peace himself. He wants to have power and to control over other humans. Power is the most bewitching influence. You give a man a little office and man, he busts every button on his coat, you know. Power, it's really more exciting than money, that you rule somebody else. You're over somebody else. And the greater the power, the greater the man thinks he is who rules. And when you get to rule a place like Russia, with all of its domain throughout the world, you get the feeling mighty big, as if you're something almost immortal. Of course, they go over to the cemetery and they find out they're not very immortal whatsoever. So our world is going to witness this extraordinary person, and a world away from God, and a world that doesn't know God will accept the masterpiece of Satan, and he will hope to bring to them world peace and world plenty. All right, it's been the goal of every empire to do this, and so Nebuchadnezzar, Xerxes, Alexander, Napoleon, Hitler, Russia today, the Antichrist will have this ambition and will rise up higher than any of the others. What would the Antichrist do with one world if he had it, one united world? He would totally suppress the total human race. You got to know that. If you don't, you're not very clever. The Christian intensifies his query, is this one world? Is it going to be anti, against God, against goodness, against mercy, against all the things that God stands for, as Soviet Russia is today? Is it going to be against all the principles that we live by and that are to us more precious than life itself? With authority invested in so few, will the humblest of men be permitted to worship as they please, according to the individual desires of their heart? Or will they be told they had to worship according to the powers that govern the whole world? Yes, the Christian would like one world, but when they see Einstein minds turning out Frankenstein monsters upon the innocent populace, and they see the shrinking millennia into minutes, and the harnessing of uranium energy, and the hearts of the people of the continents moving together in a strange unison, Christians see telescoping space with Mercury skyliners, bringing every part of the globe within a few hours of travel, does not in itself assure world unity, nor peace, nor trustfulness, nor security. The Christian says, shrink in the oceans. Do not divide the nations, but abysses of conceptions of life and ways of living. That's what divides man. World differences are not solely geographical on the face of this earth. If we can be put into a tube and sucked into Europe across the Atlantic in 5 minutes, that won't make one world. Just traveling fast will not make one world. Distance is more than miles. Proximity does not bring nations closer to understanding. I've lived in Britain for 2 years at one time, and because Britain and Ireland and Wales and England were all together and close together, it never made them one. Scotland still wants to be free. Ireland still wants to be free. The Welsh people would even like to be divorced from the empire, you see. And so proximity does not bring unity. It takes something on the inside that can create this thing that brings men and women to understand one another, to appreciate one another. So one worldism is an idealism. It is sublime, but we maintain that constriction of space by lightning telecommunications, shrinking the world into seconds, does not guarantee fraternity. It does not guarantee international comradeship, that it takes more than that. That rational humans must at this moment in time face the facts. There are potential barriers, and that's what these lessons are going to be about. To a modern world having its own safety, its own benevolence, its own goodwill toward others, there is a real, tangible, substantial reason why permanent peace and tranquility has not been, is not, and in the future may be, never be. You see, that is as far as man is concerned. A one world system is not a possibility under the existing conditions that exist on the face of this earth. So there must be a facing of the factors that separate man, that make him different from one another. You say, do you want one world? Yes, I do, but I want it conditionally. What kind of world will it be? Just because I can move to all 5 continents in a hurry does not mean that all the culture and the deep-rooted hatreds among races and nationalities will cease to exist. How can you have one world of tranquility, of peace, and of love, you know, and of care? I am sure that a judiciary court legislating laws will not create one world. It'll take more than that. A one world police force running around their little cars like these United Nations people do. This is not going to bring one world to the peace-loving people of our planet. You say, well, what can we do about it? It seems to me that the thing that you and I will have to realize and know is this, that God wants us to have one world, and the time will come when there will be one world, and it will be a different kind of world than you have ever known. From the Tower of Babel until this moment, man has labored, man has worked in order to create a harmony among human beings. I think these thousands of years are just about enough, you know, to say that man has failed in bringing peace to the earth. Not far from here, the angels sang, "Peace on earth, goodwill toward men." If we could follow that voice, we might find the peace on earth and the goodwill toward men. But we're not willing to follow the Prince of Peace. We're not willing to follow the one that could bring peace, for the simple reason that he won't begin on the outside, on the exterior. He will begin on the inside, and that we don't want. We want to be mean on the inside, good on the outside. And we want the world to have peace, and for us to have turmoil, divorces, fightings, family disruptions, men in prison, killing one another, you know. Want the world to have peace, and you don't have peace inside. Yes, I'd like to say almost all of mankind wants one world. And I'd like to say further, one day it will be, but it will not be under the present form of world government. And the United Nations will never be able to bring the one world concept that we're talking about. When they live in a land like Israel, they're divided. They don't seek to get Israel to love the people next door. They do not. They divide it, they hate one, care for the other. They mistreat one and care for the other, and they side up with the side they're on. You can't make sides. God doesn't make sides. God cares for everybody. Let's you and I begin inside and say, first, I'm going to have one world right in there. I'm going to get my own little act together, get my mind to function with my emotions, and my emotions to function with my will. And inside of my personality, I'm going to be one and not torn into 1,000 pieces. Get my family together. We're going to be one family. We're not going to be torn and beaten and hurt and not caring for one another. Then I'll get my community together, you see. You see how this thing works? It works from a center, and you are the center. Oh, yes, you know, in our country, we're always saying, take your problem to Washington. No, no, no. No, no, no. Keep it in Illinois. Keep it in Indiana. Keep it in Idaho. Keep it right there. If you've got a problem, solve it there. You can't solve it in Washington, D.C. And neither can the United Nations. And neither can Paris or Berlin. It's impossible. But you have a solution. And God does have the solution.